Many colleges have developed outcomes assessment as an add-on to their conventional instruction and grading practices in order to meet accreditation standards and college standards. In an outcomes-based approach, course grades can and should be an integral part of an outcomes-based approach to curriculum and instruction. Outcomes-based grading restores the meaning of grades and connects assessment to current faculty practice. In this paradigm, a final course grade is based on the level of learning consistently demonstrated by the student by the end of the course. When instructors have to calculate grades and then also have to assess student learning outcomes, they have to do twice the work. And the outcomes assessment part feels like busy work. When institutional researchers have to devise a means of collecting data apart from regular instruction, that makes extra work. When grades equal the level of mastery of student learning outcomes, there is no more duplication of effort. In these next batch of slides, we will look at student learning outcomes from a course with a traditional grading system versus student learning outcomes from a course with outcomes-based grading. So here are the student learning outcomes. This is for an applied organizational communication course. So you don't need to read all of these, but you can note that in this particular case, there are multiple indicators of achievement of these SLOs. They've been broken down into certain indicators and dimensions. And here are the rest of the SLOs for this course. Here is the traditional grading scale. Points are assigned for homework, attendance, exams, quizzes. In this example, some part of the performance may be assessed and evaluated using the assessment rubric, probably the presentation, perhaps the homework. There is no clear relationship between assessment of student learning outcomes using the indicators in the rubric and the final course grade. Any relationship is indirect and implied. Now we will look at outcomes-based grading. For comparison purposes, we will assume the same course, the Applied Organizational Communication course, with the same student learning outcomes. In an outcomes-based scenario, an analytic assessment rubric describes indicators and dimensions of student learning and performance levels for each SLO. Students use rubrics to guide performance, improvement, and behavior. Faculty use rubrics for coaching, assessment, and evaluation. In an outcomes-based system, for the same Applied Organizational Communication course that we looked at earlier, each outcome or component of an outcome, students' learning outcomes achievement can be non-existent, minimal, good, or superior, for instance. So what you're grading is students' achievement of each student learning outcome using descriptive analytic rubrics which clearly delineate performance levels. Here is an example of a basic grading scale in an outcomes-based course. There are points to be earned, but the points are assigned based on students' mastery of each of the SLOs. So in this example, to get an A student would need to achieve a good or a superior on all student learning outcomes. So we don't expect perfect performance for a student to get an A, just consistent high performance that is developed and demonstrated by the end of the course. To get a B, the student would need to achieve good or at least adequate on all student learning outcomes. So note that in this course, the student is responsible as part of the professionalism grade for keeping track of their own attendance and work, their own academic performance. Students should know where they stand in this course, as well as their progress towards achievement of both the course and institutional learning outcomes. In an outcomes-based instruction and grading paradigm, the final course grade is tied to the level of achievement for each outcome. For this course, students provide evidence of achievement and monitor their performance in a portfolio. Grading criteria are very clear, and a passing grade requires basic competence in every expected student learning outcome. These are the basic steps for designing or redesigning, or I sometimes say e-designing, a grading system. You must determine the weight of the outcome, determine the relationship between the points you're assigning and how those equate to performance levels, and determine the cutoff for a passing grade, as well as any points needed for higher grades. Now this slide is simply here to show that an outcomes-based grading system works for different types of courses. The portfolio model works well for certain courses, such as English or business courses, and the assignment matrix model works well for others, such as math or science. Faculty can utilize a mix of both, for instance, in medical practice, legal, etc. In the portfolio model, the main advantages, it makes students aware of and responsible for their learning. It makes all class happenings potential learning experiences. Although this method gives students more power and responsibility, the instructor must design assignments to provide learning opportunities for each outcome. In the outcome matrix model, students see the relationship between outcomes, assessments, and grades. This method is closer to traditional grading and maintains a higher level of instructor control. So what does it take to implement outcomes-based instruction and grading in a course? You must have a plan to disseminate information and create opportunities for interested people to learn, try, collaborate, and receive guidance. Professional development is needed. You don't want to try to recruit anyone who is reluctant, because that will create resistance. Faculty tend to come around to outcomes-based grading when they see it working for their students and themselves. So regarding the benefits of outcomes-based grading, it promotes communication with students, reduces challenges about grades, leads to positive assessment experiences because students know exactly where they stand and why. Outcomes-based grading increases the validity of grades as a measure of educational effectiveness, allows researchers to aggregate data on grades to document achievement of student learning outcomes by outcome, course, department, group of students, etc. Bottom line is, students care about grades. So if you grade your students based on their student learning outcomes achievement, students then will care about their SLOs. There are many ethical implications of outcomes-based grading. Outcomes-based grading provides clear expectations for all learners about what it takes to pass a course and achieve different course grades, so that it's not a mystery, and so that passing a course doesn't seem out of one's control. In this way, it is very learner-centered. Outcomes-based grading helps increase transparency about grading and helps reduce the biases of instructors. It builds positive and collaborative learning environments in which courses are all about student learning and grades merely reflect that learning, rather than are unknown with unclear expectations. Trustworthiness best describes quality criteria for outcomes assessment and grading. Credibility refers to the level of confidence in the truth that the findings have for the subjects of the study. Community college educators can build credibility by reaching conclusions through evidence from several sources of data, triangulation of data, by checking conclusions with those involved, member checking, and with people outside the system who might offer alternative explanations for the findings, such as colleagues from other colleges, or advisory committees, which is peer debriefing. Transferability refers to the extent with which the findings can be applied in other contexts or with other people. So you could follow up with a sample of students or with their employers. Dependability refers to the extent in which a different team of faculty and staff and administrators should be able to reach the same conclusions or replicate the previous team's efforts. Confirmability refers to the extent in which the conclusions rest on the evidence of the data and not on the biases of the researcher. By extending accountability activities to include community members, advisory committees, employers, and others outside the college, educators can build in checks on the possibility that their findings reflect their biases rather than the conclusions that can be supported with clear evidence. So implications for outcomes-based grading: it provides consistency across students, sections, quarters, and semesters. A passing grade means consistent, satisfactory achievement of learning outcomes. Data on course completion becomes meaningful and gives specificity to that meaning. Outcomes-based grading closes the accountability loop, defining, teaching to, assessing, and grading on the achievement of student learning outcomes. And because faculty naturally must assess student work, there is no additional burden placed on faculty beyond what is already happening as a natural part of teaching and learning. Colleges that adopt outcomes-based grading are directly and clearly accountable for the outcomes of student learning. That is my presentation. What questions do you have?
Karen.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Enrique. I'm the SLO coordinator for Fresno City College.
Hi.
How
Nice to talk to you.
Question: if I am an instructor that uses grading at the course level, and that is my only methodology for using, for doing assessments. What are the pros and cons of doing that?
So say that again. What is the part you're asking about? I'm not certain on what you're asking.
What are the pros and cons of me just assessing my SLOs with letter grades at the course level?
Okay, so I guess what I would say is if you align the learning with the grade, then that makes it meaningful. So I would say at the course level, you can, it's just a good idea the whole way through. So we're looking at how a student builds program learning outcomes across multiple courses. But within the course, you can still use A, B, C, D. It's just that what does an A mean? And in this system, what an A means is just that over time, students have consistently demonstrated high performance by the end of the course. So maybe in the beginning, they're struggling. Maybe they get help, they get feedback, lots of formative assessment, and they start building competency. So by the end, if they're able to demonstrate that performance at that higher level, then they get the A. So it's still, you can still grade pretty much the same way. It's more just setting your system up so that students understand that getting an A means demonstrating competency in those learning outcomes.
Okay, if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to put it in the chat and I can share that with our presenter today.
It's fine to just ask as well.
Yes, if you're comfortable unmuting yourself, you can also unmute. Okay, seeing that we don't have any questions, Dr. McClendon, how would you like to proceed? Would you like to, here, sorry, I just saw a question that came up in the chat from Beverly. The question is, what is your best advice for getting started with outcome-based grading?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. What I would say is look at what you're already doing. What you're already doing has been successful. So look at your syllabus, look at what you're asking students to do, and then look at a way that you can then just start building in, you want to have the analytic rubrics. So there's lots of great samples in the value rubrics. There's plenty of great samples of rubrics out there. And so just making sure you have a good assessment tool. And then really, you can start outcomes-based grading simply by converting your grading system for the next time you teach the course. And you can start it right now by just doing more use of the rubrics on the student work samples. I like to give a lot of feedback. So I show the rubrics at the beginning. We talk about them. We talk about how well, students have to perform. So we talk about what those different performance levels mean. So it's very explicit about what it takes. So I like to use it as a coaching tool. So you can start doing that right away. And then for the next time you teach it, if you can just convert your scale, then you're already outcomes-based graded. I mean, that's all you really have to do is convert the scale. The rest of the whole model is just about being very learner-centered, very clear about expectations, making it equitable, communicating a lot about how students are doing, and then having them start being accountable for their learning as well.
And then I'm getting a few more questions. So I got a question here from Victor asking, can you provide us with a link on outcome-based templates? And
Sure.
then,
Yeah, actually, I'll see what I have. But I mean, even the ones from today, if you just have a couple of different samples, you can see what they did. If you look at you have points all together for various things. What you're doing now is shifting your mindset into, basically to get the A, when you're grading them, you could grade them on a 4 or 5 point scale, for instance. I like using the 4 point scale. And so everything I grade on would be a 4 point scale, but you could have a 4 point or a 5 point scale. And the higher level would just be that they're achieving the learning at that level. So everything they're graded on then is kind of helping them, is coaching them along till the end. So maybe the first couple things they do, they get a little bit lower rating and on the rubric, and then as time goes on, they'll get a higher rating. So yeah, absolutely. I can just, I can show you a couple samples of those from what I have today, and maybe some other things just to give you an idea. Really, it really is just shifting to the different grading scale, because then everything lines up. Then how well they learn lines up with their grade. And so then if you're teaching like you teach, just getting lots and lots of feedback, the more practice that they get, the better they do typically. So you want to make sure you build in practice opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning.
okay, and then we have another question here from Janelle. Janelle says, I'm wondering if it would be a good strategy to apply this model to individual assignments first, such as
Sure.
as in baby steps. And then she says, I love the idea, just thinking I need some time to scale it up to the whole letter grade model.
Wonderful. That is a wonderful idea. So yeah, all you'd have to do is the next assignment that you get that you want to do this, you can state in the assignment itself. You can say, hey, you're going to, here's the rubric. And as you're doing this assignment, in this assignment, I would like you to be able to demonstrate these things. And so you're really telling the student what they want to, what they'll be graded on. So you make that part of the assignment, that they get to see what they're being graded on. And then you have them do the assignment, and then you can just use the rubric on it and give them feedback. And what's nice about the rubric is that has a lot of detail. So that's the part that takes the work up front. Once you get the rubric, it's just a matter of rating the student on their performance. And you can still put in narrative feedback also if you want. Some people's rubric has so much explanation that you don't need that narrative feedback. The rubric describes it to students, but it really helps, especially if you're a faculty member teaching a course where you have so much writing you have to do, you're grading a lot of papers, and you feel like you're saying the same things over and over again. The rubric can do all that work for you. So I love the idea of that. You could even have students work in teams. There's all kinds of ways I've seen this work. Team-based learning, problem-based learning, flipped classroom. This just works really well as a way of building student SLO performance.
Thank you. And it looks like Beverly responded to your response. She said, thank you. Are there additional resources you recommend, especially for STEM courses?
Okay. Oh, yes, STEM courses. Let me see what I have, and I can provide any information to the organizers of the symposium. So yeah, I'll see what I have for you. I'm sure I have some readings and materials.
So for now, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. Actually, I just got one just now. Let's see, from Juanita. She says, how do you support the outcome-based grading to your other colleagues who are traditional grading or graders?
That's a wonderful question. So what I like to do is I like to work with what I call early starters, people who get excited about the idea, because there's something exciting about helping students build proficiency. And so the more that you connect their learning to their grades, it gets more exciting for faculty too, because they see students growing and developing these skills and competencies and values and attitudes. And it's really exciting. So I think, you know, what I've always done with faculty groups is I'll show them what I'm doing. And then somebody else might want to do something and we kind of collaborate on it. And then maybe someone else does. So I just recommend a slow start to it. And, you know, because what it is in the beginning, people don't know what it's like. It's a different paradigm. It's making a shift in your mind, you know, because you still have points. It's just that the points are assigned based on the learning level. That's all it is. But it's hard to make that shift sometimes for people. They're just not sure what you're doing. And so the more you can kind of show them, hey, look, you know, like here's a presentation clip, watch this. And you can show them that, hey, look, students are performing really well in these. And so they got this grade. They get a higher grade based on, you know, their learning. So I recommend starting out slowly and get a few people who are excited about it, and then you can roll it out. And especially if the people who are excited about it are doing some of the work to set up some of the tools, you tend to get buy-in better that way, because there's some people who just, you know, really don't want to take the time to work on that part of it. But if you can show them, hey, you can still teach it the way you want, but we're going to make this little shift, people will tend to go along with that.
And we have another question here from Vivian. Do you assign points to formative work or only summative?
Okay, that's a great question. Here's what it is. I use a rubric the whole way through the course for formative assessment as often as possible. But when it shifts, what becomes a learning outcome is what they can do by the end of the course. So what I say is that all of that is the feedback building up to the proficiency. So for me, the part where it turns into a course grade is what they can do by the end. At any point though, you're giving them like a little, hey, here's how you're doing now. So you're giving them a way to check how well they're doing along the way. So grading is actually easier. If you're using the rubrics, grading is so much easier, because instead of having to go through everything all the time, you're building the competency in the same few things every time they're assessed. And one time you might just be assessing them on learning outcomes 1 and 2, maybe the next time 3 and 4, like that. But I just keep giving them formative feedback all the way through using the rubric, and then it turns into a grade later.
And we have a comment here from Aline. She says, great information. I believe you're correct. The creation of the rubric is where you need to sit down and specifically create every possible detail to grade. I believe the rubric should take care of your comments, Aline.
Can I add to that? Because I'm the one that wrote it.
This is Aline speaking.
Yeah. Eileen.
Hi, Eileen.
Yeah.
Hi, Eileen.
Howdy. I like your PowerPoint presentation, and I'm a nursing faculty, and this is very clear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we go from the hardest part that we have is giving the points. We want to give points to move it along, but it's the comments. It's the comments that my biggest thing is, if I'm not going to pass somebody, it's related to safety. It's related to safety.
Yeah.
And so it's not just because they
Critical.
didn't think of the most critical piece.
Yes.
So it's the comments that the students always want to, you have to cover yourself as an instructor, because they want to, well, I should have passed because of this. And that when when everybody keeps saying rubrics, if you don't detail a comment to cover yourself, you don't have anything to justify the grade. And that's so hard for me on this creation stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That's a wonderful comment. And I'm glad you brought up the importance of it as well. I often use the example of, I don't want to go see a surgeon who got extra credit points, and barely passed the course. So I use that a lot of times as an example, and I work at a university where we have a college of medicine, we have MD students, PharmD, and all of the like. So it's really critical that they understand those safety measures. So that's, you know, and if we think of everything that way, if we think of the importance of all the things we're teaching them, if we're teaching them the most important things, those are the outcomes, and we're giving them feedback all the time, the chances that they'll do better by the end and that they'll be competent, like you're saying, you know, it's so much better that way. We're setting them up for success.
Okay, so there aren't any questions posted currently. I'm gonna just again encourage everybody, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post it or unmute yourself and you can speak to our presenter directly. Okay, so I don't see, oh, let's see, one more post here from Kevin. He says, I see this being easier for paper, assignments, etc., but a bit tougher fit for faculty who use traditional assessments. Can you comment?
Sure. So it works well for paper. It also works well for presentations. It works well for performances, you know, such as patient safety. It works really well in courses like the science courses, math courses, because what you're doing is you're still building students' proficiency in certain learning outcomes that you want. So in that case, you still have a rubric showing certain things, because you're not only wanting them to be able to, let's say, calculate something, although that can be the learning outcome, but you can take exams and you can make sure that every single question is a really good measure of a learning outcome. And then you can group those questions by learning outcome. And so you can do it that way as well. And so by the end, you know, students will know exactly what they're doing right and what they're not. Let's say you're measuring critical thinking. Maybe they're great at coming up with lots of alternatives, but they have trouble selecting one. You know, so taking an exam and tagging the questions to the SLOs, that works as well. So I think it works for, I mean, everything that I've ever run into, it works for.
Okay, so I got a question. This one came directly to me. They're asking about the PowerPoint and recording for this presentation. I believe, Enrique, is this something you can comment on, whether this will be shared with all the participants?
Yes, we will have all the recordings, and also the breakout session recordings and PowerPoint presentations into the SLO Symposium website, and they will be there. We will ask the presenters to provide their PowerPoint presentation, and also along with the recording. And that will be going out to an email after we do the evaluations. You will get a email address, which is the SLO Symposium website, and then you can go in there and search for what you need. And there's other resources too, not only this.
Thank you, Enrique. Okay, so Dr. McClellan, currently we do not have any questions in the chat. We have about a little less than 10 minutes left for this session. So if there are any questions, please feel free to post or unmute yourself. Let's see.
And also people are welcome to reach out to me if you have a question. If you're trying to implement this and you have a question, no problem to reach out to me. Not a problem.
So we have here a question from Deanna. How well does it work for language courses? I'm having trouble figuring out how the rubrics would align with language acquisition.
So what I would do is go back to your course learning outcomes, whatever you're expecting students to demonstrate. So let's say, for example, this is, you know, making this up, but let's say it's, that's weird. What is that noise? It's very strange. I don't know what that is. Let's just say that you have a course learning outcome that says something like, that was coming out of my speaker and I have no idea. Something like their fluency in speaking. Let's say it's about speaking. So maybe they're more hesitant in their speaking, or maybe they're more fluid in their speaking. You know, you could just, when they're doing those performances, then you could rate them on that. Let's say you're having them translate something and you're looking at something on paper. You could have a, you know, performance level of understanding that they're supposed to do. So I would say you can do it for language courses just like you could anything else. Does that answer the question?
I haven't seen a response from her. Let's see. She said,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Yes, no problem. I don't know where the music is coming from, but I'm glad I can entertain everyone. Sorry about it. It's been a weird day with audio.
No worries. It wasn't too loud either.
Okay, good. Hey, any other questions? If you guys have other questions about other types of courses, go ahead and ask now. It's, you know, to me, that's the fun part is, yes, in our minds, certain courses work better, but when you start thinking about it, they all work. Because all you're doing is focusing on the learning, whatever it takes to demonstrate competency for whatever your course is.
Yeah, I don't see any questions coming in. We are coming to the
Okay.
towards the end.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. One more question right here. Every time I'm
Yay.
gonna close out. Let's see. From Juanita, are the rubric based on point system or mastered?
So let me think how, I guess it's more like this. The rubrics are analytic rubrics. So they're actually based on each one of the indicators or dimensions of that learning outcome. And then there's performance levels that are assigned to it. So the performance levels can be assigned points. And you know, that's where most faculty do that.
She clarified it. She meant to say mastery.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's their mastery level, but you can assign points to their mastery level so that you have something to add up at the end. You know, some faculty just look at the rubrics and see where they are on the rubrics for all the final. Because you know, again, you can use the rubric the whole way through, but as far as when you're doing the grading, it's best to have your signature assignments at the end, your bigger projects, your ways where they're really demonstrating learning at the end. So let's say you're using an exam, you wouldn't want to use an early exam, you'd want to use the final cumulative exam. So you can assign points to those performance levels.
So I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
As of right now, I'm going to go ahead and post the evaluation survey for this session. So if everybody here who is participating can please go in and fill out the survey for this session. That would be helpful for the folks planning this. Is there any other last comments you'd like to provide, Dr. McClellan?
I'd just like to thank everyone for attending the session, and let me know if you have questions. And I encourage you to, give it a try and see what happens, because I think that it gets really exciting to see what students can learn when they're given even more feedback that's related to what their grade is going to be. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. And then, sorry, again, just to address the PowerPoint, the recording of this will all be shared coming from the folks organizing this symposium. So again, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.